Well, good morning, everybody. I want to thank my colleagues on the House Budget Committee who are standing here with me for all the hard work they've been doing to put this budget together. I also want to thank Senator Jeff Sessions for joining us here, who is the ranking member of the Senate Budget Committee. This is the path to prosperity. This is the budget that we are putting forward today. This represents our choice for our country's future, and it's our commitment to the American people. Look, the facts are very, very clear. For too long, Washington has not been honest with the American people. Washington has been making empty promises to Americans from a government that is going broke. The nation's fiscal trajectory is simply not sustainable. The debt is projected to grow to truly catastrophic levels in the near future, leading to an economic collapse and a diminished future. We don't need clever politicians in Washington. We need real leadership, and that is what we intend to provide. The President's recent budget proposal that he gave is worse than just a commitment to the status quo. The President actually accelerates our descent into a debt crisis. He doubles the debt by the end of his first term and triples the debt by the end of his budget. He imposes a $1.5 trillion tax increase on the American economy at a time when we need more economic growth and more job creation. He proposes to permanently enlarge the size, the reach, and the scope of the federal government. He offers no reforms to save our vital health and retirement security programs, and no leadership. Our budget charts a different course. It's very different than what the President has offered. For starters, we propose to cut $6.2 trillion in spending over the next 10 years from the President's budget. We reduce the debt as a percent of the economy. We put the nation on the path to actually pay off our national debt. Our goal here is to leave our children and our grandchildren with a debt-free nation. We offer $4.4 trillion in deficit reduction in the first 10 years alone. Our budget is our plan to tackle this country's greatest problems. If we don't take on these fiscal challenges head-on, we will not be able to do this under our own terms in the kind of gradual, important, sensible way that we are proposing here today. My colleagues on the House Budget Committee were instrumental in laying this vision out and putting these numbers together. I also want to thank the people at the Congressional Budget Office who worked so hard overtime, overnight, to get all of this added up. With that, I would like to turn over to Congressman Jason Chaffetz from Utah, and our committee members are going to walk through the contours of this budget. Mr. Chaffetz.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks to all my colleagues here on the House Budget Committee. I happen to also be on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee, and I think all of us are committed to change the way we're doing business in Washington, D.C. We're not here to perpetuate the status quo because the status quo is not working. The cuts are important because we need to be on a trajectory to actually maintain the fiscal sanity that is in this country. We want to restrain the explosive growth of bureaucracy, achieving a 10% reduction over the next 3 years in the federal workforce through attrition, coupled with a true pay freeze for the next 5 years and reforms to government workers' generous benefit programs. We want to end the corporate welfare and permanent bailout of Dodd-Frank. We want to take Fannie and Freddie off the backs of the taxpayers, and energy or agriculture focus on spurring competition and targeting investment, not having the government pick winners and losers from Washington, D.C. We're committed to these reforms. It will be an exciting process moving forward. It's a pleasure to serve on this committee, and I think the American people will be excited that we're living up to the obligations and the commitments that we made in the Pledge to America in bringing back this Congress and bringing back the fiscal sanity that is so important to this country. Thanks, Frankie.
One of the things that we are also trying to achieve is we believe in this country that we ought to have a social safety net. We believe that we ought to have a safety net to catch people from slipping through the cracks, to help people when they're down on their luck, and to help people who cannot help themselves. Problem is, our social safety net is fraying at the seams. To talk about how we repair our social safety net, I want to turn to Todd Young from Indiana.
Well, we mustn't just focus on getting government smaller and more efficient. It has to be more effective. And nowhere is that more apparent than with respect to our nation's social safety net. We in this budget build upon the successes of welfare reform in the 1990s, starting with Medicaid, which we know is a program that for decades has ensured access to health care to millions of low-income Americans. We want this program to be sustainable. Unfortunately, under the current financing model, it's unsustainable. So we took a look at the financing structure, which is driving our national debt higher and straining state budgets. Governors like Mitch Daniels of Indiana, governors of both parties from around the country are asking for more flexibility with respect to the Medicaid program. We give it to them. Our approach is to end the onerous one-size-fits-all approach to Medicaid financing. Instead, we convert all federal spending into block grants, into allotments to each of the respective states. We give governors, in conjunction with their state legislatures, the flexibility to tailor Medicaid to the needs and desires of their own citizens. We took a similar approach to food stamps and to housing assistance. These are other one-size-fits-all Washington programs where we change them to block grant programs to the states. We give, again, governors flexibility to target aid to the neediest citizens. And finally, we recognize that the best welfare program is ultimately a job. So we reformed our job training programs. We consolidated the current complex maze of dozens of federal job training programs into a single program, a program that we can hold accountable. It's a targeted scholarship program that is going to truly prepare our workers for a 21st century globally competitive economy. These are bold programs, bold reforms, but they're reasonable reforms, the sort of thing that many of us campaigned on before we came here in Washington. I welcome a constructive dialogue with our colleagues about how we can further strengthen and sustain our social safety net for our lowest income Americans. Thank you so much. And next will be Dr. Price to discuss the reform of health entitlements.
Thank you, Todd. Americans are truly sick and tired of Washington's accounting tricks and budget gimmicks and, as the chairman said, empty promises. This budget right here, this path to prosperity is based upon facts. And as a physician, I can tell you that the facts are that Obamacare is a threat to the affordability and accessibility and quality of health care. It takes away choices from patients and families and doctors and saddles workers and job creators and taxpayers with trillions of dollars in costs. And the facts are that the current Medicare spending is growing at a rate twice as fast as the nation's economy, with 10,000 baby boomers reaching retirement age every single day. Now this budget repeals Obamacare and saves Medicare so that health and retirement security will be possible for all Americans. This budget repeals and defunds the government takeover of health care so that we can advance patient-centered health reforms. And this budget reflects an honest assessment about the current unsustainable trajectory of Medicare and saves the program for future generations. Under this budget, we provide a common-sense solution by allowing folks to have access to the same kinds of coverage options that members of Congress enjoy. No changes, let me repeat, no changes are made that would affect those in or near retirement. This budget also forces action on saving Social Security by requiring the President and congressional leaders in both chambers to put forward solutions to save this critical program. Many of us have offered ideas on how to save Social Security, and more will be forthcoming. And this budget clears the way for those solutions and requires all to come to the table. This budget, right here, will move us from an era of debt and doubt and despair into a stable and secure future by being honest with the American people. I'm honored and proud to stand with my colleagues of the Budget Committee to support the path to prosperity.
Next, we're going to hear from Representative Diane Black from Tennessee, a member of the House Ways and Means Committee on Tax Reform.
Thank you, Chairman Ryan, and I am proud to be standing here today as a member of the committee unveiling a budget that takes real steps to get this country's finances back on track and focuses on real economic growth and job creation. This Republican budget stands in sharp contrast to the one that the President released a few months ago, which would impose a $1.5 trillion tax hike on American families, and that's not including the $800 billion tax increase contained in Obamacare. This budget halts the President's plans to burden our hard-working Americans with more taxes. Instead, it keeps taxes low so that the economy can grow again. And by lowering these rates and also broadening the base, we can ensure that our tax code is simpler for families, that it's less burdensome for our workers, and allows job creators to grow their businesses and hire more people. This budget also encourages the very economic growth that is the key to our country's future prosperity and security. And as a member of the Ways and Means Committee, I know that Chairman Dave Camp has outlined a pro-growth tax reform with top rates of 25% for both the individuals and the corporate side. And we're serious about forwarding proven pro-growth policies. In both of my committees, Ways and Means and in Budget, we're working to get this country back on a sound financial footing. And I'm proud to be here today as part of the Republican majority that will lead where the President has failed. And that is to restore America's future growth and prosperity. And I turn it back over now to our chairman.
I want to congratulate Diana on her great choice of committee assignments. You know, they often say around here that the Democrats are our adversaries and the enemy is the Senate. That is not how we view Senator Jeff Sessions. Let me now turn it over to the ranking member of the Senate Budget Committee, Senator Jeff Sessions.
Well, this is really not a political matter at its bottom. President Obama's Budget Committee chairman told us, Erskine Bowles and Alan Simpson, that we are facing the most predictable financial crisis in our nation's history. Therefore, we have to act. The Budget Act requires 3 budgets to be submitted, one from the President, one from the House, and one from the Senate. The President has submitted the most irresponsible budget in the history of this republic, facing the kind of systemic threats that we know we face. As his own debt commission has said, he has punted. He increases spending every year, discretionary and defense. He increases taxes and increases debt. Interest payments would go from $200 billion last year to $940 billion in 10 years. So the Senate has produced nothing, and the House has stood firm. You have, in the face of all kinds of threats, that we're going to attack you and we're going to use every kind of political force against you, you have looked the American people in the eye and submitted a fact-based budget that will stand up to scrutiny, that will alter the unacceptable trajectory we're now on. People can disagree and make suggestions about the details, but fundamentally, it's an honest budget, the most historic and positive event I've seen since I've been in Washington. I believe it will make a difference. Congratulations. And we're going to take the matter to the Senate. We're going to stand up to those who are going to attack you for having the courage to tell the truth about the challenges we face. And I believe you're starting a national dialogue, Paul, all of you. Thank you for your courage and your willingness to stand firm.
Thank you, Senator. Now let me walk you through some of the charts and some of the numbers. If you take a look at the screens on the side here. First of all, let's look at spending. Let's look at spending. All right, look at our historic path of spending. Our historic size of our government has been right around 20% of GDP. Here is the path that we are on right now. This is the path that the President's budget is complicit with. This is the path of spending where the size of our government is double by the time my kids are my age, and then it goes up from there. Here is the spending path that this prosperity plan presents. We bring the size of government back down to 20% of GDP where it has historically been and lower from that. We have budget enforcement mechanisms with multiple kinds of spending caps to enforce this. This is how we get $6.2 trillion in spending cuts off the President's budget in the first 10 years, $4.4 trillion in deficit reduction itself. Let's take a look at deficits. Take a look at where we are headed. We've had deficits in the past. We had a small time of surplus. Look at where we are headed with our deficits. This, again, is where the President's budget plan is complicit with. This is the path of the status quo. These are the kinds of deficits we're going to be racking up if we don't do something to fix this problem. Here is the path that we are proposing with respect to our path for prosperity, our budget. Very different choice of two different futures. Let's talk about debt. Now, we've had debt in this country before. People are familiar with debt. People get a mortgage to buy a house, you get a car loan. And typically you measure your debt as relative to your income. Well, take a look at our debt. Over the last, since World War II, we've had debt. And in World War II, it went up to about 108% of GDP. We've had high debt before. That was temporary. We loaned it mostly to ourselves, but then it went back down. And our debt went down to reasonable levels. Look at what the Congressional Budget Office is telling us is our future of debt. This red ink is going to destroy our economy. We know, as a matter of fact, that we are giving the next generation a lower standard of living. In fact, we actually asked the Congressional Budget Office to tell us what the future of the economy looks like. So they ran computer models simulating the economy forward. The models break in 2037. The computer literally crashes in 2037 because, according to the CBO, they can't conceive of a time in which the economy can continue past that moment because of this burden of debt. What does the Path for Prosperity propose to do with the debt? This is our debt path. We, according to CBO's long-term analysis, get this debt not only contained, not only under control, we get it paid off. That is the future we want for our children. We believe we have a moral responsibility to put the kinds of controls and reforms in place that keep this country growing. Now let me turn to growth. We need jobs growth. We need economic growth. So we asked the Heritage Center for Data Analysis to review this budget with respect to economic growth. They used the Global Insight model, which is probably the most well-reputed model used. Here is what their results show. This plan results in faster economic growth. Nearly $1.5 trillion in additional economic growth over the decade. This plan is estimated to result in more jobs. Nearly 1 million jobs next year to be created under this plan than otherwise would be. It predicts that the unemployment rate goes down to 4% in the year 2015, and then in the last year of this budget, we're kicking off creating nearly 2.5 million new jobs in the private sector in that year alone. It also predicts higher wages, $1.1 trillion in higher wages for workers. It also predicts higher family income, nearly $1,000 per family per year result from the better economic growth that this plan for prosperity presents. This is a plan for prosperity. And so when you take a look at the choice of two futures we have, we can either choose the red line, which is the sea of debt and deficits, the line the president's proposing we go on, the line our country is on, or we can choose that green line, where we face up to the challenges that are confronting this generation now to give our country a better future. Look, we've always had a legacy in this country where each generation, whether it's war or depression or whatnot, takes on its generation's challenges so the next generation's better off. We know for a fact that we are not going to be giving our children a better standard of living. We know we're not going to make them better off. That is a fact that is not doubted by any independent fiscal expert. We owe it to our country, to our kids, to fix this problem. Now let me just simply close with this. One of the worst experiences I've ever had in Congress was the 2008 financial crash. That caught us by surprise. I and others were in the middle of all the negotiations where we had an economic crash that came. And out of that resulted really ugly legislation, TARP. And then we witnessed trillions of wealth being lost. Then we witnessed millions of seniors lose their savings. And then we witnessed millions of people lose their jobs. We're still trying to recover. Let me ask anybody who is listening this. What if your congressman, your president, saw it coming? What if they knew it was going to happen? What if they knew why it was going to happen, when it was going to happen, what nature, and more importantly, what if they knew what could be done to prevent it from happening, and if they had time to prevent it, but they decided not to because it wasn't good politics? What would you think of your president, your member of Congress? Well, God, that is where we are right now. This is the most predictable economic crisis in our history. And what are we doing, playing politics? We don't need clever politicians. We need leaders. We need leadership. And so we believe we have a moral imperative. We got together on the Budget Committee in our Republican caucus, and we decided it is time to stand up and do what is necessary to fix this country. We need to be honest with the American people about the problems we face. We need a fact-based budget, no more accounting tricks, no more budget gimmicks, And that is what we are offering the American people with this path for prosperity. Be happy to take your questions.
Chairman Ryan.
Dan.
Even with all of the changes in the cuts that you proposed, the budget would not see a surplus for 2040.
Till the late 2030s.
Right, for
That's
about
right.
28 years, for a generation. Some of your fellow Republicans, maybe not those standing here, say, you got to do it sooner.
Right. So, Dana, this just shows you how deep of a hole our country is in. This just shows you it took many years to get in this hole, and it's going to take us a lot of years to get out of this hole. What matters the most is we get this on the right trajectory, is that we get our debt containable, that our mortgage payment on our children's future is shrunk and going down. This just shows you the sooner you act to fix these problems, the better off everybody is. As it was mentioned before, the kinds of reforms we're proposing don't affect senior citizens. They don't take benefits away from people who are 55 and above. And what we're showing is we can achieve that if we go now. What happens if we keep kicking the can down the road? We go about $10 trillion into the hole of more empty promises. Every year we don't do anything. And that means bitter European-like austerity. That means cuts to seniors, tax increases that slow down the economy. And so we want to preempt that kind of austerity, and we want to get us on the right glide path. It's going to take us a long time to dig our way out of this problem, but we can dig our way out of this in a sensible way, in a secure way, and we can save these entitlement programs from bankruptcy.
Mr. Ryan, to play the devil's advocate, if you didn't go as far as you went in terms of cutting taxes, couldn't you balance the budget?
So we do not propose increasing taxes. Now, here's a big difference. If you, on paper, raise taxes, can you move the numbers farther? Sure. Here's what happens. You lose jobs. You lose economic growth. We need two things. We need spending cuts and reforms and economic growth. You raise taxes on the economy, you raise taxes on the American people, you don't get the growth. Here's the other problem. We are now in the 21st century. We are in a global economic environment. In Wisconsin, we don't just compete with people from Illinois and Iowa. We're competing with people from India and China. And when we tax our businesses at the highest tax rate in the industrialized world, when we tax our producers, our small businesses, our economic producers more than our foreign competitors tax theirs, we lose, they win. We don't want that to happen. That's why we need economic growth through fundamental tax reform. Chad.
Thank you. All right. As you roll this out, the timing comes amid this debate about the CR. Is there any effort by leadership or you or others to say, look, guys, if we can figure out a way to keep the government open, we're going to be able to cut trillions with this budget in the coming weeks? And there's a number of freshmen here, people who are resistant to, go for another CR. Certainly, what's on anything less than $61 billion. Can that be used as a fulcrum to keep the government open? Just, I know the timing. This is how we do this every year.
Yeah. Yeah. So the question is, we have the CR. We have a specter of a government shutdown. We're talking about billions in spending cuts. Does this help move us through this moment? First of all, the reason we're talking about a CR and a government shutdown is because the Democrats didn't pass a budget last year. For the first time since the 1974 Budget Act, the House Democrats last year didn't pass, let alone even propose a budget. That's why we're in the mess we're in right now. Second point is, the Budget Act says have your budget ready by April 15th. You know what? We're going to play by the rules. We're going to actually not only propose a budget, we're going to move a budget in the timeline that has been prepared by the Budget Act. So we do want to get from talking about saving billions of dollars, which we want to save, to talking about saving trillions of dollars and getting this country on the right path. And that's what this does.
Does this, I mean, again, I know the time.
I don't know the answer to the question whether this helps us pass the CR or not. That remains to be seen. Look, we will have passed 3 bills now, once this bill is passed, to prevent a government shutdown. We passed our first one something like 45 days ago. The Senate hasn't passed one. So if you're asking about who's aiming for a government shutdown, look at the legislative chamber, the United States Senate, that has not passed one bill to prevent the government from shutting down. We don't want a government shutdown, but we also don't want to rubber stamp high, big spending. We want spending cuts as well. Taylor.
Social Security is going cash negative this year. Why didn't you address that? And secondly, why do you guys agree with the administration on the defense budget? Why don't you cut more than they do?
So let me go with the defense budget. We think Bob Gates is doing a pretty good job. Now, people can disagree with some of the things he's done and said, but we think that Secretary Gates has done a good job of going through the Pentagon budget and looking for a bunch of waste and a lot of inefficiencies. So our budget reflects those policies. It reflects taking $178 billion in savings out of the Pentagon budget, reinvesting $100 billion of that into defense capabilities, and saving $78 billion from the defense budget for deficit reduction. On Social Security, I will turn it over to my friend, the colleague from Oklahoma, Mr. Langford, for a moment. But let me simply say this. Health care, we know where the Democrats and the President want to go. We know what they've done to health care. We fundamentally disagree. we've put out specific alternatives. Social Security is the area in which I hope we still have room for bipartisan agreement. So what we are trying to do in this budget is advance that idea, set the table, require the President to send a plan to the Congress, require the Senate and the House to submit plans so we can actually get on to the idea of saving Social Security on a bipartisan basis. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Langford, who has something to say about that.
Well, the issue is that we're dealing with a Senate and a presidency at this point that's saying Social Security's later. What we want to be able to do is set it out and say, let's have them look at it and to say, if this is not solvent at this point, then we've all got to come to the table with a plan. At least, step one of this, admit there's a problem. Currently, we've got the Senate and the presidency that are saying there may be a problem, but it's much later than now. We can have good options on this and resolve it if we'll get on it, but we've got to get all three groups to the table. So step one for us is a very clear statement to say all of us have got to come to the table. We look at it. If we're shown to be insolvent in this current time period, it puts a trigger for the House, the Senate, and the President to all bring a plan. We all sit down and start working through the plan. So we've got to all get together on it.
John.
The fundamental deal, the bargain that was in the Simpson-Bowles agreement was that Democrats were going to accept changes in the entitlement program they just didn't want to do. Republicans were going to accept changes in the tax system they didn't want to do. And everybody was going to swallow pain for some kind of political deal. Why are you basically rejecting that, that agreement, that everybody is going to do something they really don't want to do?
So I'd say a few things. We have dozens of proposals in here from the Deficit Commission. I was a member of the Deficit Commission. Look, I think Erskine Bowles, he's my favorite Democrat, by the way, and I hope I didn't hurt him by saying that. Erskine Bowles and Alan Simpson did a great job. We're taking dozens of provisions from that Deficit Commission and advancing it, including it in this budget. The reason I didn't vote for the Deficit Commission at the end of the day, and I think I can speak for the other House members, Hensarling and Camp, is because it didn't address the key drivers of our debt, health care. So this is why Alice Rivlin and I put out a plan in the Debt Commission to deal with Medicare and Medicaid. Alice Rivlin is a great, proud Democrat, Brookings Institution, Clinton OMB director. This path to prosperity builds upon those Rivlin-Ryan plans that we put in here. But the reason we didn't support the Debt Commission is it didn't, in my opinion, deal with the drivers of our debt. The issue on taxes is this. If you tax something more, you get less of it. If you tax something less, you get more of it. We don't want to tax jobs more. We don't want to tax investment more. We don't want to tax small businesses and entrepreneurs more. We want them to be taxed less so we can get more of them, more jobs, more growth. So we're proposing, very similar to Simpson-Bowles, just not the revenue-raising side of it, lower the tax rates, broaden the tax base to get more economic growth. That is what the Commission recommended. We follow within the general thrust and framework of that in this.
And real quickly, on Rivlin-Ryan, Rivlin-Ryan maintained the fee-for-service.
No, it didn't. Rivlin-Domenici does what you're saying. Rivlin-Ryan is different. But I think that is something, as we go through the specs of this, as we follow through with details, as you know, it's a budget resolution, the authorizing committees, I think that's something that we should definitely, I think that's a good idea. Carl.
What do you say to nervous Republicans who say that this is a political kamikaze mission? You've just given Democrats a big target that may ultimately cost Republicans your majority here.
None of them say that. Just kidding. Jonathan, look at these people, look at these new people who just got here. They didn't come here for a political career. They came here for a cause. This is not a budget, this is a cause. And look, we can all go do something else with our lives. We're not just here so we get this lapel pin that says we're a member of Congress. We are here to try and fix this country's problems. And that means, if that means we have to go first and offer solutions, fine. If that means we're giving our political adversaries a political weapon to use against us, which, by the way, they will have to distort, demagogue, and lie to use it, shame on them. We owe it to the country to give them an honest debate, to have that adult conversation that is necessary, and so that is our contribution to the debate. We cannot keep going down the path of fearing what the other political party would do to us if we try to solve a problem. If we keep going down that path, then we know what that future looks like.
Mr. Ryan, is there any way that any of these proposals can be enacted before the next election, and what would be the path to doing that?
Of course they are. I mean, look, if we try to judge our decisions based upon whether or not this can get into law or not, then we might as well just go home. Look, I think a lot of these ideas can get put into law. I think what we're trying to do is set the table for Social Security reform. I think there's a lot of things in here. A lot of things came from Democrats. I mean, a lot of these ideas came from Democrats, from the Fiscal Commission, from the General Accountability Office. So we think we're trying to get as many bipartisan solutions that have bipartisan fingerprints on them. We're putting them together and advancing them. And at the end of the day, we might just have to have a debate or a decision in this country about the choice of two futures. The path the President has proposed is a path of higher taxes, higher debt, a diminished country. We don't want that path. We want the American exceptionalism. We want the path of the American idea being alive and thriving for the next generation. Steve.
A lot of Republicans, majority of Republicans, every Senate Republican signed on to a balanced budget amendment. This budget appears to easily violate that. You've got $8 trillion in more debt over the next decade. Do you need to rewrite that amendment? How is this compatible with, $8 trillion in more debt over the next 10 years, compatible with getting rid of the deficit in 5 years?
I've been a supporter of a balanced budget amendment since the days I came to Congress in 1998. Our baseline, our fiscal situation has gotten so bad, this just tells you what kind of work it needs to do to fix it. One of the components of the balanced budget amendment is a cap on government spending. We propose that. I think the key focus for freedom and economic liberty is to bring the size of government down. This does that. This brings the size of government down and forces it with a cap so that our government is limited in scope so that our economy and our people can be free. This is about securing prosperity for the next generation, growing our economy now. If we would have a balanced budget amendment in law, it'd take probably 7 to 10 years to do that. And so it's pretty crazy to try and speculate what the baseline will look like at that moment. But the key here is using real numbers, using CBO. We're putting a path to getting this debt paid off.
Chairman Ryan,
Jay.
What do you hope the administration's response to this budget will be? And is there a window here for some kind of grand bargain attached to the debt ceiling?
Okay, the first question is, what do I hope the administration? I don't know. I hope they read it before they criticize it. That hasn't happened yet today. But I hope that they take a sincere look at it. I hope the administration looks and sees, well, this idea I agree with, this idea we don't. My sincere hope is we've got to get something done in this country. And yes, we have divided government. It has worked before in the past. So hopefully the administration will say, well, you know what, you Republicans on A, B, and C, we agree with you, so let's do that. X, Y, and Z, like Obamacare, we don't agree with you, and we're just going to disagree. Hopefully that kind of an adult conversation can occur. On the debt limit, we think this gives you a great menu of options and policies to pick from as a package with a debt limit. So we think we advance the conversation on going toward the debt limit, because what's the purpose of having a debt limit? Stop it from going up. And let's not rubber stamp just another debt limit increase without fixing this country for our current economy and our children and grandchildren. And there are a lot of ideas in here on how to do that.
So you take these very different approaches to Medicare and Social Security. In the case of Medicare, you huge changes in the plan. In the case of Social Security, you talk about a process because you say there's a chance for bipartisan consensus. If there's no chance for bipartisan consensus on your Medicare proposals, what's the path to getting there?
So one of the reasons why we put specific details out there on Medicare is because the President already went a different direction with health care. The Democrats went a different direction in health care. They really believe in a government-run system. And I think logic, proof, history shows you government-run health care doesn't work. Under the President's path, and we repeal the IPAB, this is the Government Rationing Commission in Medicare, that is a rationing agent which will basically price control Medicare down, tighten the screws, and will send a lot of providers out of business. On your point, Craig, as you know, and you know my roadmap well, my roadmap does have vouchers. This doesn't have vouchers. This is a different proposal. This builds along the Rivlin-Ryan plan, which is not a voucher system. This is a premium support system. It works just like the Medicare prescription drug benefit works for current seniors today. Name me another government program that was created that came in 40% below cost projections. Medicare Part D did. Why? Because it gives consumers, seniors, choice. It has insurers competing against each other for their business. We want to harness the power of patient choice, of competition on behalf of senior citizens, future seniors in Medicare. And so what we're proposing is no changes in Medicare for anybody who is 55 and above. They get the Medicare that they've organized their retirement around. But because Medicare is the biggest driver of our debt, because Medicare is going insolvent and bankrupt according to the trustees, because we want to save Medicare so it's a program that people can actually rely upon when they retire, we propose to convert it to a system for younger people that is identical to the system I have as a member of Congress and all federal workers enjoy. It's choice, it's competition, it's protection. We propose that we support people more if they're low income, more as they get sick, and wealthy seniors don't get as much support. And doing it that way fixes the problem, saves Medicare. Under this bill, Medicare and Medicaid, spending goes up every single year. It goes up at a more sustainable rate so that it's solvent and sustainable.
But it sounds like you're saying that unlike Social Security, there's no possibility of a bipartisan path.
I think the President and the Democrats have leaned forward farther on health care, and they've chosen. They've done Medicare law, they've done Medicaid law, they've done health care law, which we really disagree with. And so I don't know that the specter of a compromise, something tells me when we repeal Obamacare, he's probably not going to sign that bill into law. So Social Security is an area where I'm cautiously optimistic about progress. I do believe that this is a program that we can fix. We were this close on the Fiscal Commission to fixing it. We didn't quite get there, but I would like to think that that is an area in which we can get some success on, and that's why what we put in here was to try and set the table and move the process toward a bipartisan solution.
What are the assumptions that you're basing your projection that the deficit will be paid? Debt would be paid
This is
down?
CBO numbers. We're using CBO score, CBO baseline, CBO's long-term score.
What assumption did you give them that
I didn't. CBO, we don't give CBO assumptions. CBO uses their baseline and their score.
Thanks, guys.
But what about the healthcare revenue numbers, Mr. Ryan?
In the appendix, CBO has said it raises the deficit.
Last question. No, we use CBO.
It's clearly put out other numbers. Right.